Hey guys, so today I am going to be talking about all the very specific things that I like seeing in books, as well as giving you recommendations for books that have those very specific things in them. Hopefully that made sense. Let's get into it. Like I said, we're going to be talking about some pretty specific things that I like in books. This isn't necessarily tropes, right? This isn't these are books with this trope or that trope. I think one or two of them are tropes. But they kind of expand upon the tropes, right? It's not just found family, but found family with XYZ. So yeah, if you have super specific book taste the way I do, then you might like some of these books in some of these really hyper specific things that I like seeing in books. So the first thing I really love seeing in books and want to see more of is books from the villain's perspective. And not a redemption arc, not a and they turn good. I like a villain who is complex, who is kind of got his reasons that you can understand their reasons, but they're still doing terrible things and being villainous. I live for that. I want a relatable villain who I can understand their point, but they're doing things that you're ooh, no. But then it's you're rooting for them in this really weird way, but you're I should not be rooting for you to do this, but I'm kind of rooting for you to do this. But really, you shouldn't do this. I love that. And the book that I feel fits that to a T is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is probably my favorite V.E. Schwab book. And I love V.E. Schwab. But Vicious is just my absolute favorite. This is told from the perspective of villains. Both of our main characters are villains. They're just villains on different sides of the spectrum, right? So I absolutely adore Victor Vale. He's just the best. And he's terrible. He's a terrible person. And he's got some decent motivation, but he does some real messed up things in order to get his point across and to do what he feels he needs to do. And you're kind of rooting for him, but you're ooh, boy. And he does a lot of things that are not redeemable, but you still just love reading from his perspective. And I absolutely love this. I love this one. I love the second book in the series, and allegedly there is going to be a third book in this series, which I'm very excited about. I pre-ordered the graphic novel that is set between Vicious and Vengeful that doesn't follow these characters but follows another extraordinary. So good. I'm so excited. If you don't know what this book is about, we follow these two college friends, and they are working on this thesis where they try to discover the existence of extraordinaries. So your X-Men, your people with powers. And they discover that in order for this to happen, people have to have a near-death experience. They basically have to die and not be dead. And kind of come back, right? And so they make that happen. And this is told in a very jumpy timeline. We get past, present, past, present, past, present. And we're following these two characters, Victor and Eli, as they go from friends to enemies to just kind of hating each other even more. And they just grow in their villainy and they're just justifying themselves, but really they're both the villains. And I love it so much. I need more books like this. The next thing, probably, if you have been around here any amount of time, will not surprise you at all. And that is, I love books with mom main characters. And we don't get that as much as I would like to. And when we do typically get mothers, and specifically in fantasy books, we get this very one-dimensional character And they're either portrayed as terrible or just like very maternal and all they care about is their kids and they have no other sides to them and they're just very one-dimensional and they're only in the background and it's really annoying, right? Like as a mom myself, like I want to see like badass moms save the world or, you know, like that's what I want. It's what I need. And I've luckily found quite a few books like this. I actually did an entire video a while back of books with badass moms. So go check that out. The list is growing though, right? Like we've got more. We've got more badass moms to talk about. And I actually have 2 books that I haven't talked about as much before for this recommendation that are not in that Badass Moms in Fantasy video. And the first one is Erase the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. This is a standalone adult fantasy, which, you know, we don't get enough of and I love. And this follows a mom who is kind of down on her luck and she's like this former monster trainer and she's just about to lose her daughter and it's like a whole thing. And she ends up in this like really like political scheme that she gets like wrapped up in and doesn't really know that she's in it first. And she's like, oh crap. And she's training this like younger girl to ride these Keyhawk monsters for this race. And she absolutely has to win this race so she can A, have enough money to save her daughter. But then it ends up being so much more than that. And it ends up becoming like saving the Empire and all these people. She's so multifaceted. She has differing interests. She's, you know, this mom that's very maternal and protective of her child, but she's also so much more than that. And I love that about her. Sarah Beth Durst, in my opinion, writes some of the best mother representation in fantasy. And she is actually a mother herself. So that makes perfect sense to me. So definitely pick up Erase the Sands if you want a badass mom and a standalone adult fantasy. Also coming in hot with the amazing badass mom who is multifaceted is Zhang Guen's Shadow of the Gods. I was not sure I was going to like this because I didn't love Malice. But this made up for it. I absolutely love Shadow of the Gods. And we have, you know, multi-POVs, but our one that we're talking about specifically is Orca, and she is a mother, but she's also like some kind of warrior. You're not really sure. She's just like this badass character, and when her son is kidnapped, she is going to burn everything to the ground to get him back, and no one is going to stand in her way, and I absolutely love it. This book is so good, and even if you didn't like Malice, I recommend picking this one up because I didn't like Malice and I absolutely loved this. Next up, kind of on that same vein, is I like seeing books with good parents, right? For some reason, specifically in like YA and even middle grade, we get a lot of terrible parents. And I get it, right? A lot of times the parents are only in these YA and middle grade stories in order to propel the plot and allow their teenage child to go off on their own and save the world. Because they're terrible and the kid just goes off on their own, right? Or they're dead. They're either terrible or dead. In like 99% of like YA and middle grade books. Like dead, bad, terrible. Like think about it. How many good parents do we see in YA and middle grade? Not very many. And I want to see more like supportive parents in YA and middle grade specifically. I think it's really important to see. I think it's really good for like the children that are reading these books. And the one that I absolutely love that I think has a great parent-child relationship where the kid is still kind of able to like get off on their own a little bit and like move the plot forward, but the parents are still there loving their child and protecting their child and doing all the things that parents are supposed to do. The City of Ghosts by V.E. Schwab. Another Victoria Schwab. This is a middle grade where we follow this girl who can see ghosts. She had this near-death experience and now her best friend is a ghost. She sees ghosts and her parents are actually like paranormal investigators and they travel around the world to the most haunted places in the world, shooting this TV show about these haunted places. Well, they don't know that their daughter sees ghosts, but their daughter does, and they're so supportive and like protective, but you know, she still is able to kind of get away, and like, you know, while they're working, she kind of goes off on her own, and you know, normally she'll have like an adult supervise, or she kind of just sneaks off, which whatever, that's normal for kids. But they're there, and they're supportive, and they love her, and they're, you know, these protective parents. And when they like realize like, oh crap, she said she was with you, she's supposed to be with you, why is she not with you? And they're like, I don't know, like the person that's supposed to be watching her, they go to find her. So it's like a really good parental representation within this series as a whole. Another thing that I absolutely love seeing is supportive female friendships. For some reason, in so many books, we get catty females that are like, they're always competing against each other and trying to one-up each other. And it's like, we can never just be supportive and be friends and be like, yeah, you did so good. And oh my God, you did so good. Like, it's always like, she did good and I did not. Da, 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 da. We have to compete with each other. Like, no, like sometimes you're just real supportive of your friends. And like, you become friends, and like, you figure out that even though you're maybe not as good as this thing as they are, like together you're better. And I absolutely love that, and we need to see more of that and less like only one girl and like everyone else is terrible. So a book that I really love that I think does this very well is the Queens of Rinthia series. This is The Reluctant Queen. So this is the third book, but the first book is Queen of Blood. I'm not going to dig for it right now because this new big ass chair of mine covers up half of my bookshelves, and I'd have to like dive behind it to pick it up. But Queen of Blood, I have a full review. Check it out. Such a good series, right? And our main girl, Delena, becomes good friends in the first book with this group of girls that she's in magic school with. And while, yes, there's kind of this like competitive element with one of the girls, it's still not to the point of it being like catty and one-upping each other. Like, yeah, they have this like competitive nature with each other, but like they're still helping each other in the long run. And then as the book goes on, she realizes that she needs more help. So she gets more help from another female, and they end up working together instead of competing against each other. And that's more so in like book 2 and 3. It's just so good. We have some really good friendships in this book, and I love seeing it. And, you know, women don't need to compete with each other. We need to lift each other up. And I love seeing that in my fantasy books. Next, we have death. And I know that sounds really bleak and morbid. Like, I know. But hear me out. You can't have this epic scale fantasy with battles and high stakes and war and everybody get out unscathed. You just can't. Like, you can't have your sacrifices mean nothing because you're resurrecting people. You can't have, like, the whole main crew get out alive. Like, it's not reasonable. It's not realistic. And I know this is fantasy. It doesn't have to be realistic. But still, I need to see consequences, and I need to see deaths matter, and I need to see like the actual ramifications of these super high stakes, or else it's like makes the high stakes mean nothing, right? So I like when authors are not afraid to kill off their main characters, not afraid to not resurrect people. I want that. I want it to matter. And a series that I think does this very, very well is the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. He's not afraid to kill people in a meaningful way, and I feel like that makes the series so much more hard-hitting. It makes just everything mean something, because he's like, all right, we're just gonna do this. Like, war has a cost, and not everybody's making it out alive. And obviously, we're not going to talk about it because that would be hella spoilers, and we're not doing that in today's video. But just know that this series will break your heart, It's got a lot of meaning. It's got your sacrifices always mean something. And I think he does that very, very well. Let's check it out. All right. This one is kind of like a trope explained, right? I love found family. I did a full video about books with found family that I absolutely enjoy. But more specifically, I like found family where the characters are kind of forced together and they're all so different walks of life, different opinions, different everything, right? Like they shouldn't work together. Like they shouldn't get along. They should just be so different that you know that this is not a normal friend group, right? This is not a normal thing. Like they would not have gotten along if they weren't forced together. I love that. I want these people from differing walks of life put in a situation together where they realize how similar a lot of their views are. And then they just become these great friends and this found family and they're this crew and you love them. And I just love seeing it. And one of my favorite recent books that does that so well is The Disasters by M.K. England. This is a sci-fi standalone young adult and it gets not nearly enough love. I have a full review for this book if you want to check it out, so I won't go into it too deep. But we have a bunch of people who are kicked out of this space academy. They happen to be on this shuttle to go home when the academy is attacked. Everybody but them are killed and they are on the run. And they are this group of people that should not get along, but they're kind of forced to. And by the end of it, they are this one big happy found family crew. And I just love it so much. Go check out that review. Go pick up this book. Another thing that I absolutely love seeing is when the first love interest in a book is not the ultimate love interest. I know this is something that Sarah J. Maas does very, very well all the time in like all of her books, I think, but I don't really like her. Like I've just never vibed with her books and that's fine. But I love seeing that trope done because, I mean, how many of us have been in love before, but like you're not with that person anymore? I know that some people marry their high school sweethearts and they're together forever and that's beautiful, but like it's not something that happens all the time. Like I am definitely not with the first person that I fell in love with in high school and dated forever. Like I'm not even with the second person. Like it took some frogs. But one thing that I absolutely love seeing is that progression where it's like, okay, it was a good relationship and then it didn't last and that's fine. And then we move on to somebody else and maybe that doesn't last or it does. And I'm also not talking about love triangles. No, not love triangles. Doesn't count. So we're not talking about love triangles here. We're talking about where the people had a love interest and then they either died or it didn't work or whatever. And then at some point they meet someone else, right? So a book that I have found that I really enjoyed that shows that trope is Girl of Fire and Thorns. I really, really love it. And I think we actually have a few different love interests in this series as a whole. I've only read the first one, so take this with a grain of salt. I don't know. But it's like you have multiple love interests over the course of this book. But it's not always the same one or the one that you think she's going to end up with or whatever. And I really like how they kind of subvert that trope in this book. And I'm really excited to read the rest of it because I really, really liked this. And the final, like, super specific thing I like seeing in books is I like seeing our main character have these, like, great intentions and, like, want to do so well and be so good and have these great intentions. And then the world just beats them down and beats them down and beats them down and things happen and there's trauma. And this person ends up kind of going dark side. Like, they still have these good intentions, but, like, they're going about it all wrong. This kind of goes with the very first one we talked about, where I like villains and, like, really complex villains. But I really love seeing a good girl go bad. And I think the best series that really represents seeing a good girl go bad is the Poppy War series by R.F. Kuang. We follow Rin through multiple years of her life in this series, and it's just the progression into darkness and madness, and I love every minute of it, and all of it makes sense, and you can see why she does the things she does, and why she really wants what's good, but she doesn't always go about it the right way, and she's kind of going down this path that there is no returning from. And I absolutely love it. And I think this really represents the good girl gone bad trope, or highly specific thing that I like in books. And I have a whole talk about this series as a whole. I have a review for book 1, and then I have a talk about the whole series. So if you want to check those out, I have a whole playlist of spoiler-free reviews that you can check out, and you can see that. But this book, probably one of my favorite series ever, and it has that super specific thing that I just love. All right, so those are all of the super specific things that I like in books, along with some recommendations for you guys. Let me know if you have any super specific things that you like seeing in books, and what books fit those super specific things, because I just would love to check out more books, and maybe I own some, because I have a whole ton of books that I own that I need to read. So recommend me something. Recommend me something based on one of these tropes. Pick up one of these books if you like the same tropes or highly specific things. Let's have a conversation in the comments. I'm always here to talk to you guys. All right, thanks for hanging out with me. My name's Jessie, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.